He prepared his cruel speech about her pathetic attempts to compete with his model girlfriend, but lost all words when 3 identical girls helped their billionaire mother down from the helicopter she pilots herself. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now subscribe to the channel, and let's get started. The crystal chandelier in the Fifth Avenue apartment cast prismatic reflections across Maya Washington's tear-filled eyes as she stared at the positive pregnancy test trembling between her fingers. Her breathing came in short, shallow bursts while her mind raced through possibilities, none of them matching the fairy tale she'd believed she was living for the past 3 years. "It's going to be fine," she whispered to herself, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "We talked about having children someday. This is just sooner than planned." Maya smoothed down her dress, a designer piece Jackson had insisted on buying her last month, and glanced at the elegant dinner she'd prepared. Candles flickered atop the mahogany dining table, casting a warm glow over the perfectly arranged place settings. The playlist she'd created for the evening, soft jazz that Jackson preferred, hummed quietly from hidden speakers. 3 years. 3 years since that night when Jackson Reynolds had walked directly across the ballroom floor toward her, ignoring socialites and celebrities alike. Maya had been balancing a tray of champagne flutes, working the charity gala to help pay for her community college tuition. "You don't belong here," he'd said, his blue eyes intense beneath perfectly styled blonde hair. Maya had stiffened, preparing for yet another entitled guest complaining about the help. "Not as a waitress," he'd continued, taking the tray from her hands and placing it on a nearby table. "Someone with your presence should be attending these events, not serving them." That night had marked the beginning of what Maya thought was her personal Cinderella story, the hard-working girl from the Bronx swept off her feet by Manhattan's most eligible bachelor. What she hadn't understood then was that fairy tales were merely pretty packaging for darker truths. The sound of a key in the lock jolted Maya from her memories. She quickly tucked the pregnancy test into her pocket and checked her reflection in the gilded mirror. Despite her best efforts, her eyes remained red-rimmed, her expression tense. "Maya?" Jackson's voice echoed through the apartment. "Something smells good." She took a deep breath and moved to greet him, summoning a smile. At 32, Jackson Reynolds cut an impressive figure in his tailored suit, heir to one of New York's largest real estate fortunes, and every bit the aristocrat his lineage suggested. "I made your favorite," Maya said, accepting his perfunctory kiss on the cheek. "The duck with orange glaze from that restaurant in Paris you love?" Jackson loosened his tie, his eyes scanning the elaborate dinner setup. "What's the occasion?" "I just thought we should talk." Maya guided him toward the table, her heart hammering so hard she was certain he must hear it. They sat down to dinner, Jackson immediately reaching for his wine while discussing his day, acquisitions and boardroom triumphs that once fascinated Maya but now seemed distant, separated from her by the weight of the plastic stick in her pocket. "You're quiet tonight," he finally observed, placing his fork down precisely alongside his plate. Maya set her own utensils down, untouched food growing cold. "I have news," her voice caught. "Important news." Jackson raised an eyebrow, waiting. With trembling fingers, Maya withdrew the pregnancy test and placed it on the table between them. "I'm pregnant." The silence that followed seemed to stretch into eternity. Jackson's expression didn't change at first. He merely looked at the test as one might regard an unexpected insect at a picnic, unwelcome but not yet determined to be dangerous. "Pregnant?" His voice held no warmth, only a calculated coolness that sent chills down Maya's spine. "That wasn't in the plans. I know we didn't plan this, but we can make it work. We can—" "There is no we, Maya." Jackson adjusted the Patek Philippe watch on his wrist, his eyes avoiding hers. There never really was. The world seemed to tilt beneath Maya. "What are you saying?" Jackson stood, buttoning his suit jacket in a practiced motion. "Let's not pretend this was heading toward forever. It's been an interesting experiment, but I have responsibilities to my family name that you could never understand." "Experiment?" Maya's voice cracked on the word. "That's what I've been to you? An experiment?" "What would you call it?" Jackson moved across the apartment with terrible efficiency, opening closets and drawers. "The girl from the Bronx I tried to polish into something acceptable for New York society." Maya remained frozen at the table, watching as he began methodically separating his possessions from hers. The careful way he avoided touching her things, as if they might contaminate his, spoke volumes more than his words. "Where exactly do you think this was going, Maya?" Jackson continued, his voice taking on an edge of irritation. "That one day I'd present you as Mrs. Reynolds at the Metropolitan Opera Gala? That I'd introduce you to my mother's friends at the Colony Club?" Each question struck like a physical blow. Maya stood on unsteady legs, moving toward him. "I thought we were building something real. You told me you loved me. And you were a delightful diversion." Jackson pulled designer suits from the closet, draping them over his arm. "But a man in my position eventually needs to make appropriate choices." Movement outside the window caught Maya's attention. A sleek Bentley had pulled up to the curb below, its silver body gleaming under the streetlights. In the passenger seat sat a willowy blonde whose face Maya recognized from society pages and fashion magazines, Veronica Huntington, international model and fixture of New York's elite circles. Understanding crashed over Maya like a wave. "You're leaving me. Tonight. You already have someone else." Jackson didn't bother denying it. Instead, he disappeared into the bedroom, returning moments later with hastily purchased cheap luggage. He began unceremoniously stuffing Maya's clothes inside. "You never were enough, Maya. Just an experiment, a Bronx girl I tried to transform into something presentable for New York society," he declared with clinical detachment. "Did you actually believe someone with your background could fit into my world permanently?" Tears streamed freely down Maya's face now. "I'm carrying your child, Jackson." His laugh was perhaps the cruelest sound she'd ever heard. "A black girl with a community college education could never manage the Reynolds legacy," Jackson said, his voice dripping with disdain. "I need a child with proper pedigree, not a mixed-race bastard who would embarrass my family. You really thought this was permanent? That I would present you as Mrs. Reynolds in the circles I frequent?" Maya felt each word like a razor slicing through her dignity. She had sacrificed so much, distanced herself from family who disapproved of the relationship, abandoned her own dreams to fit into his world. Now, pregnant and alone, she was being discarded like a fashion accessory that had gone out of style. "Please, Jackson," she begged, grasping for the last thread of hope. "Don't do this. Not to our baby." "Your baby," he corrected coldly. "And I suggest you consider your options. Someone like you has no business trying to raise a child properly." By midnight, he had packed most of his belongings and arranged for movers to collect the larger items the following day. Maya sat on the edge of the sofa, numb with shock as her world disintegrated around her. "I'll have my lawyer draw up paperwork regarding the apartment," Jackson said, checking his phone. "You'll need to vacate by the end of the month." "End of the month?" Maya's voice was barely audible. "Where am I supposed to go?" Jackson shrugged. "Back to the Bronx, I imagine, where you belong." With those parting words, he closed the door behind him, leaving Maya alone in the suddenly cavernous apartment. The December snow fell relentlessly outside the windows as dawn broke over Manhattan. Maya hadn't slept. She'd spent the night alternating between tears and stunned silence. On the coffee table lay an envelope Jackson had left. Inside, $3,000 in cash and a cold note. "Hope this covers any inconveniences. Don't try to contact me. My lawyers will be prepared." Maya placed a protective hand over her still flat stomach. "It's just us now, little one," she whispered. "But we're going to be okay." She moved through the apartment, touching familiar objects that no longer belonged in her life. The books she'd read to impress Jackson's friends. The dresses he'd bought to remake her in his ideal image. The framed photo of them at the Hamptons, his arm around her waist but his smile not quite reaching his eyes, a detail she'd chosen not to notice. Her community college diploma hung in the small home office, the one achievement that was truly hers, earned through night classes and exhausting double shifts. Jackson had insisted on framing it, calling it charming, in a tone that she now recognized as condescension. Maya carefully removed the diploma from its frame. This, at least, would come with her. At the door, she paused for one final look at the apartment that had been her fairy tale and her prison. The crystal chandelier still sparkled in the morning light, indifferent to her suffering. The designer furniture would remain, waiting for Jackson's next experiment. With shoulders squared and chin lifted, Maya closed the door behind her, an act that felt both like an ending and a beginning. The hallway stretched before her, leading to an uncertain future but one that would be entirely her own. As she closed the apartment door for the last time, Maya could never have imagined that 15 years later she would be landing her private helicopter on this very building, now the owner of an empire that would make the Reynolds name seem insignificant. The bitter December wind cut through Maya's thin coat as she stood outside her grandmother's apartment building in the Bronx, her single suitcase at her feet. The contrast between this weathered brick structure and the gleaming glass tower she'd left behind in Manhattan couldn't have been more stark. She hesitated before pressing the buzzer, shame and fear wrestling within her. What would Grandma Eudora say about her predicament? The only person in her family who hadn't warned her about Jackson Reynolds, about men who saw women like her as temporary amusements rather than lifetime partners. When the door buzzed open, Maya dragged her suitcase up 4 flights of stairs, each step a painful reminder of how far she had fallen. The elevator, perpetually out of service, seemed like the perfect metaphor for her life, things that should work, but didn't. The door to apartment 4C opened before she could knock. Eudora Washington, 73 years old with a spine as straight as her moral compass, stood in the doorway. One look at her granddaughter's face told her everything. "He's gone," Maya whispered, her voice breaking. Eudora simply opened her arms, and Maya collapsed into them, sobbing like she hadn't allowed herself to do in Jackson's presence. The older woman held her tightly, one hand stroking her granddaughter's hair. "My sweet girl," Eudora murmured, "this house always will be your home, no matter what happens." Inside, the apartment was exactly as Maya remembered, small but immaculate, filled with treasures from Eudora's 50 years working as a housekeeper for wealthy families. The couch was worn but comfortable, the kitchen barely large enough for a small table, and the single bedroom Eudora had already prepared with fresh linens. "You take the bedroom," Eudora insisted, guiding Maya to sit at the kitchen table while she prepared tea. "I can't take your room, Grandma." "You're not just thinking for yourself anymore," Eudora replied, her eyes dropping meaningfully to Maya's midsection. When Maya's eyes widened in surprise, the older woman chuckled softly. "Grandmothers know these things. How far along?" "About 6 weeks," Maya admitted, cradling the mug of tea Eudora placed before her. "I told Jackson last night and—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Eudora's face hardened. "That boy showed his true colors, didn't he?" Maya nodded, tears threatening again. "He said I was just an experiment, that someone like me could never fit into his world." "His world," Eudora scoffed. "His world is built on other people's labor and pain. Your world, Maya Washington, is whatever you choose to build." Over the next few weeks, Maya settled into a routine of sorts. Mornings spent sending out job applications, afternoons searching for affordable housing, evenings helping Eudora with dinner and household chores. Her community college degree in business administration, once a source of pride, now seemed woefully inadequate as rejection emails piled up in her inbox. "We're looking for someone with more specialized experience," one polite rejection read. "The position requires availability for extensive travel," explained another. The unspoken reality became clearer with each passing week as her pregnancy began to show. No one wanted to hire a visibly pregnant woman without connections or exceptional qualifications. 6 weeks after moving in with Eudora, Maya sat on a hard plastic chair in a community clinic, counting the coins she'd scraped together to pay for the bus fare. The clinic offered free prenatal care through a local program, a fact that simultaneously filled her with gratitude and shame. She'd gone from designer medical care on the Upper East Side to a crowded waiting room where the receptionist could barely pronounce her name correctly. "Washington?" called a nurse, mangling the pronunciation. Maya followed her down a narrow hallway to an examination room where she met Dr. Chen, a petite woman in her 50s with kind eyes and an efficient manner. "First pregnancy?" Dr. Chen asked, reviewing Maya's intake forms. "Yes," Maya answered, trying to keep her voice steady. Dr. Chen looked up, studying her face. "And you're doing this alone?" Something in the doctor's tone, not pity, but understanding, made Maya's careful composure crack. "The father he's not involved." Dr. Chen nodded, as if this was information she'd processed many times before. "Well, let's see how this little one is doing." The ultrasound gel was cold on Maya's slightly rounded belly. Dr. Chen moved the wand methodically, studying the grainy images on the screen with focused attention. Her expression shifted, brows furrowing slightly. "Is something wrong?" Maya asked, panic rising in her throat. "Not wrong," Dr. Chen replied slowly, "but I'm seeing something unexpected." She adjusted the wand, pointing to the screen. "Do you see these flickering spots? These are heartbeats." "Heartbeats?" Maya repeated. "As in plural?" Dr. Chen nodded, a smile breaking across her face. "I'm detecting 3 distinct heartbeats, Ms. Washington. You're carrying triplets." The room seemed to spin around Maya. "Triplets? That's not possible. I can't. How would I possibly—" "Deep breaths," Dr. Chen instructed, placing a steady hand on Maya's shoulder. "This is certainly unexpected news, but we'll figure it out together." When the shock subsided enough for Maya to form coherent thoughts, the enormity of her situation crashed down upon her. One baby had seemed impossible enough. How could she possibly manage 3? "I don't know how I'm going to do this," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Chen removed her gloves and sat on a stool beside the examination table. "Sometimes the universe gives us exactly what we need, not what we think we can handle." There was something in the doctor's expression, a hint of personal understanding that made Maya ask, "Do you have children, Dr. Chen?" A shadow passed over the doctor's face. "No, my wife and I had plans, but she passed away 5 years ago. Cancer." "I'm so sorry," Maya said, genuinely moved by this glimpse into the doctor's life. Dr. Chen shook her head as if clearing away painful memories. "Life rarely follows our carefully laid plans, Ms. Washington, but that doesn't mean the new path can't be beautiful." As Maya prepared to leave, gathering her few belongings, Dr. Chen appeared at the door with an unexpected proposition. "I'm in need of an administrative assistant at my private practice," she said. "The hours would be flexible, and the office has a small room in the back that could be converted to a nursery when the time comes." Maya stared at her in disbelief. "But you don't know anything about me." "I know enough," Dr. Chen replied simply. "You have education, you're resourceful, and you're going to need support. The job is yours if you want it." 2 days later, Maya started work at Dr. Chen's private practice in a modest medical building near the border of the Bronx and Queens. The salary wasn't much, but it came with health insurance and the promised flexibility that would become crucial in the months ahead. While Dr. Chen saw patients during the day, Maya organized files, scheduled appointments, and handled billing. But it was during the quiet late evenings, after Dr. Chen had gone home, that Maya discovered both a problem and an opportunity. The filing system was chaotic, paper records mixed with partial digital entries, insurance claims in disarray, patient histories difficult to access quickly. One night, Frustrated by having to search through 3 different systems to find a single patient's history, Maya began sketching an integrated management system on a notepad. "There has to be a better way to organize all this," she muttered to herself, drawing flowcharts and database structures based on concepts she'd learned in her business administration courses. The next morning, Dr. Chen found Maya asleep at the desk, surrounded by pages of notes and diagrams. Instead of being angry about Maya staying overnight, the doctor studied the sketches with growing interest. "This is brilliant, Maya," she said, waking her gently. "You've essentially designed a complete patient management system." Maya rubbed her eyes, embarrassed. "I just thought it might help streamline things here." "It's more than that," Dr. Chen insisted. "Have you considered developing this further? There's a massive need for better systems in community healthcare." Over the following months, as Maya's pregnancy progressed and her belly grew to accommodate 3 developing lives, her concept evolved as well. By day, she implemented basic versions of her system in Dr. Chen's office. By night, she expanded the design, envisioning how it could connect patients, providers, pharmacies, and insurance companies in underserved communities. As her 6th month began, life at Eudora's small apartment became increasingly challenging. The bedroom could barely fit the growing collection of second-hand baby items friends and neighbors had donated. Maya now slept on the pull-out couch, her expanding belly making even this simple accommodation uncomfortable. One warm spring morning, Maya returned from an early prenatal appointment to find Eudora sitting unnaturally still at the kitchen table. Something in her grandmother's posture sent alarm bells ringing in Maya's mind. "Grandma? What's wrong?" Eudora looked up, her expression strained. "Just a little tired, sweet girl. Nothing for you to worry about." But by evening, Eudora was in the emergency room. By midnight, the diagnosis came: a massive stroke. By dawn, Maya sat alone beside her grandmother's hospital bed, holding a hand that would never again stroke her hair or wipe away her tears. "I promise," Maya whispered to Eudora's still form, "your great-granddaughters will have the future you dreamed for me. I'll find a way." The days following Eudora's death passed in a blur of funeral arrangements and heartbreak. The apartment, already too small, now felt cavernous without her grandmother's presence. Maya realized with growing dread that without Eudora's Social Security income supplementing her own modest salary, even this humble home would soon be beyond her means. Dr. Chen, upon learning of Eudora's passing, insisted Maya stay with her temporarily. "Just until you find something suitable," she said, showing Maya to the guest room of her modest queen's house. "There's space here for the babies when they come." One evening, as Maya's 7th month began and her due date loomed on the horizon, Dr. Chen joined her at the kitchen table with an unusual proposal. "I've been thinking," the doctor said, pouring tea for them both. "I never had the chance to have children with May. After she died, I assumed that particular dream had died too." Maya listened, uncertain where this was leading. "Watching you these past months, your determination, your intelligence, the way you've faced each challenge has made me realize something." Dr. Chen's eyes were bright with emotion. "Family isn't just what we're born into. It's what we choose to build." "What are you saying?" Maya asked. "I'd like to help you raise these children, Maya, not just as your employer or friend, but perhaps as family." Dr. Chen's voice wavered slightly. "I'd like to formally adopt you if you're open to it, to be your mother in paper, as I already feel in my heart." Tears spilled down Maya's cheeks as the offer sank in. After months of abandonment and loss, here was someone choosing her children. "I would be honored," Maya whispered, reaching across the table to grasp Dr. Chen's hand. The legal adoption process began the following week. Maya would become Maya Washington Chen. Her children would have a grandmother figure from birth, and the small management system she'd designed for one medical practice would soon grow into something neither woman could yet imagine. That night, As Maya lay on the sofa in Dr. Chen's living room, her hands resting on her enormous belly where three distinct personalities already seemed to be forming, one calm, one active, one seemingly contemplative. She felt something she hadn't experienced since before that fateful evening with Jackson. Hope. While Maya drifted to sleep on the sofa, three lives pulsing within her, she didn't know that these three heartbeats would become the soundtrack to the greatest resurrection story New York City had ever seen. Maya's dreams that night were a tempest of memories and fears, her subconscious replaying the moment of abandonment again and again. She woke with a start, her hands instinctively cradling her 8-month pregnant belly. Outside the window of her small rented room, snow was falling heavily, coating the Bronx in a deceptive blanket of pristine white. For a moment, she simply watched the flakes dance in the glow of the streetlight until a sharp pain lanced through her abdomen. "Not now," she whispered, glancing at the clock, 3:17 in the morning. "You're not due for another month." But her body had other plans. Another contraction seized her, this one strong enough to make her gasp. Maya reached for her phone, fingers trembling as she dialed Dr. Chen. "The contractions are about 12 minutes apart," she explained, trying to keep her voice steady. "But it's too early. They shouldn't be coming yet." "Triplets often arrive early," Dr. Chen replied, her voice calm despite being woken in the middle of the night. "I'll meet you at Bronx Community Hospital. Should I call you an ambulance?" Maya glanced out at the worsening storm. "They'll take too long in this weather. I'll take the subway." "The subway? Maya, you're in labor." "I don't have a choice," she said, already pulling on the warmest clothes she could manage over her swollen belly. "I can't afford a taxi all the way to the hospital, and I don't want to bring 3 babies into the world in the back of an ambulance." Despite Dr. Chen's protests, Maya ended the call and finished dressing. She packed a small bag with the few items she'd prepared for the hospital: second-hand baby clothes, a worn nightgown, toiletries. The building was silent as she made her way down 4 flights of stairs, pausing twice for contractions that seemed to be getting closer together. The wind hit her like a physical blow when she stepped outside, driving snow into her face and nearly knocking her off balance. The nearest subway station was 3 blocks away, a distance she normally walked in minutes but now loomed like a marathon. One step at a time, Maya told herself, clutching the railing as she navigated the icy steps down to the street. Each block was a battle against pain, weather, and fear. Halfway to the station, a contraction strong enough to make her vision blur forced her to lean against a building, her breath forming desperate clouds in the frigid air. "Please," she whispered, unsure if she was addressing her unborn daughters or some higher power. "Please help us get there safely." The subway platform was mercifully deserted when she arrived, but the train was late, delayed by the storm. Maya paced slowly, counting minutes between contractions that were now coming 8 minutes apart. When the train finally arrived, she collapsed into the nearest seat, drawing concerned glances from the few passengers brave enough to travel in such weather. An elderly woman, bundled in layers of worn wool, sat across from Maya. After observing her wince through another contraction, the woman moved to sit beside her. "My daughter gave birth alone too," she said in a thick Eastern European accent, her wrinkled hand covering Maya's. "You will manage. Women always do." The train lurched between stations, each delay stretching Maya's nerves thinner. By the time they reached her stop, the contractions were 6 minutes apart and strong enough that she could barely stand upright. The hospital entrance seemed to blur and shift in the driving snow as Maya staggered the final block. She pushed through the emergency room doors, her coat covered in snow, her face contorted in pain. "Please," she gasped to the startled intake nurse. "Help me! The babies are coming!" What followed was a blur of activity, a wheelchair materializing beneath her, voices calling for an obstetrician, forms thrust before her that she could barely see through tears of pain, let alone sign. "Where's your partner?" someone asked as they wheeled her toward the elevator. "There isn't one." Maya managed between gritted teeth. Family? Someone we can call? Just Dr. Chen. Amelia Chen. She's meeting me here. In the delivery room, time lost all meaning. The contractions came in relentless waves, each one feeling like it might tear her in half. Dr. Chen arrived, still wearing her coat over hospital scrubs, her face a welcome island of calm in Maya's storm of pain. "You're doing beautifully," she assured Maya, checking her progress. 5 centimeters dilated. We still have a way to go." Hours blurred together. Nurses changed shifts. The storm outside grew worse, then gradually subsided. Through it all, Maya endured, alternately walking the small delivery room when she could bear to stand and curling on her side when the pain overwhelmed her. "I can't do this," she sobbed after 15 hours of labor, exhaustion making her voice crack. "It's too much." Dr. Chen wiped Maya's forehead with a cool cloth. "You are already doing it, Maya. Your daughters are coming, and they need your strength for just a little longer." At the 18-hour mark, the first baby crowned. 3 pushes later, Trinity Washington entered the world with a piercing cry that seemed impossibly loud for her tiny 2-pound, 3-ounce body. "She's perfect," Dr. Chen announced, quickly passing the infant to a waiting neonatal team. 1 minute later, Ivy Washington arrived, slightly smaller but with an equally fierce determination to announce her presence. And precisely 60 seconds after her sister, Kennedy Washington completed the trio, her tiny fists clenched as if ready to fight the world that awaited her. Maya collapsed against the pillows, tears streaming down her face as she watched 3 separate teams of medical professionals attend to her daughters. "Are they okay? They're so small." "They're fighters, like their mother," Dr. Chen assured her, squeezing her hand. "The NICU team is the best. They'll take good care of your girls." Later that evening, exhausted beyond anything she'd ever experienced, Maya was wheeled to the neonatal intensive care unit. Her daughters lay in separate incubators, connected to monitors and IV lines, each wearing a tiny knit cap, one pink, one yellow, one green, the only way to tell them apart at first glance. "They're beautiful," Maya whispered, placing her hand against the clear plastic of Trinity's incubator. "Perfect." "They're stable," the NICU doctor informed her. "Excellent lung development for their gestational age. With triplets born this early, we'd normally expect more complications." Maya smiled weakly. "They're overachievers already." She spent hours beside the incubators, speaking softly to each daughter in turn, promising them a future filled with love and opportunity. When exhaustion finally forced her back to her room, she fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. The morning light was filtering through the blinds when a knock at her door woke her. Maya expected to see a nurse coming to take her back to the NICU. Instead, a man in an expensive suit stood in the doorway, a leather portfolio tucked under his arm. "Ms. Washington?" he inquired, his voice as cool and impersonal as his appearance. "I represent Jackson Reynolds. May I come in?" Maya's heart stuttered in her chest. "Jackson sent you? Is he here?" The lawyer's expression remained impassive. "Mr. Reynolds is not present, no. I'm here to discuss some paperwork regarding your situation." He entered without waiting for permission, pulling a chair beside her bed with mechanical precision. From his portfolio, he extracted several documents bound with a blue cover. "My client is prepared to provide a sum to ensure this matter remains discreet," the lawyer explained, sliding the document toward her. "In exchange, you will never reveal the identity of the father or seek any form of child support." Maya stared at the papers, too stunned to immediately respond. The document's title swam into focus: Voluntary Termination of Parental Rights and Confidentiality Agreement. "He wants to legally deny his own children?" she finally managed, her voice barely audible. "Mr. Reynolds is prepared to offer $15,000 as settlement in full," the lawyer continued as if she hadn't spoken, a generous amount considering the circumstances. Maya's hands trembled as she lifted the document. Phrases jumped out at her, relinquishes all rights, waives any future claim, agrees to maintain strict confidentiality. Buried in the legal language was a clause stating that any violation would require her to return the money plus damages. "He knows there are 3 of them?" Maya asked, looking up at the lawyer's impassive face. A flicker of something, perhaps discomfort, crossed the man's features. "I'm not privy to all the details of Mr. Reynolds's personal matters." Maya set the document down on her lap, suddenly calm despite the storm of emotions inside her. Jackson hadn't even bothered to learn he had 3 daughters, not 1. He'd simply sent his legal errand boy to erase his responsibility with the equivalent of pocket change for a man of his wealth. "Tell me," she said, meeting the lawyer's eyes directly, "does Mr. Reynolds typically place such a low value on his own flesh and blood? Or is it just because they're half black?" The lawyer shifted uncomfortably. "Ms. Washington, this offer is quite standard in these situations. You should consider it carefully. Single motherhood is extremely challenging, especially with multiple children." Maya picked up the document again, turned directly to the signature page, and ripped it cleanly in half. Then she tore it again and again until confetti-sized pieces littered her hospital blanket. "Tell your client that his daughters will not need his money," she said, her voice steady despite the tears threatening to spill. "One day, he will regret not having been part of their lives." The lawyer gathered his portfolio, his composure cracking slightly. "This is ill-advised, Ms. Washington. Mr. Reynolds is a powerful man. The offer won't remain open indefinitely." "Neither will my patients," Maya replied. "Please leave now." After the lawyer departed, Maya requested a wheelchair. Despite the nurse's protests that she needed rest, she insisted on being taken to the NICU. There, beside the 3 incubators holding her sleeping daughters, she made a solemn promise. "You will never know the abandonment that I knew," she whispered, placing a hand on each warm plastic dome. "And one day, we will show him, show all of them, the mistake they made in underestimating us." In the quiet of the hospital room, as snow began falling again outside the windows, Maya watched her daughters sleep, 3 tiny warriors already defying the odds stacked against them. She hadn't planned this path, but standing at its beginning, she felt a fierce determination take root where doubt and fear had lived. In that hospital room, with 3 newborns sleeping in their cribs beside her bed, Maya didn't know that her refusal of the hush money would be the first step toward building an empire that would one day buy out Reynolds's very legacy. The rhythmic beeping of the NICU monitors became Maya's lullaby during those first precarious weeks. She'd return to her small rented room only when the nurses insisted, sleeping a few fitful hours before returning to the hospital. The triplets remained in their incubators, growing stronger each day despite their early arrival. Trinity, the firstborn, showed a surprising alertness, her eyes following Maya's movements whenever she approached. Ivy, the middle triplet by 60 seconds, was the smallest but fought the hardest, already ripping out feeding tubes that nurses would patiently replace. Kennedy, the youngest, remained the calmest, observing her new world with what seemed like thoughtful contemplation. "You're going to wear yourself out," Dr. Chen cautioned one evening, finding Maya asleep in the uncomfortable NICU chair, her hand stretched through the porthole of Kennedy's incubator. "They need you healthy when they come home." Home. The word filled Maya with equal parts longing and dread. Her rented room was barely large enough for her alone, let alone 3 infants and all the equipment they would need. 2 weeks after their birth, Dr. Chen arrived at the NICU with an unexpected proposal. "I've converted my home office into a nursery," she announced without preamble. "There's a daybed for you, 3 cribs, and I've arranged for a part-time nurse to help for the first month." Maya looked up, dark circles under her eyes betraying her exhaustion. "I can't accept that. You've already done so much." "This isn't charity, Maya," Dr. Chen replied firmly. "This is family. Besides, I need you back at work. The office filing system has collapsed completely without you." The day the triplets were finally discharged, weighing just over 4 pounds each, Maya experienced a terror unlike anything she'd known before. How could she possibly keep 3 tiny humans alive when she barely knew how to care for one? That first night in Dr. Chen's home established the pattern that would dominate the next 5 years. Maya and Dr. Chen tag-teamed feedings every 3 hours, changing diapers in synchronicity, soothing tiny cries in the darkness. Between care sessions, Maya collapsed into micro-naps, her body struggling to recover from both childbirth and chronic sleep deprivation. By day 3, Maya had established a system. A color-coded chart tracked each baby's feeding schedule, diaper changes, and medications. She arranged the nursery for maximum efficiency, changing stations centralized, bottles prepared in advance, clothes sorted by size rather than by child, since all 3 wore the same tiny preemie outfits. "You're organizing babies like a business project," Dr. Chen observed with a mixture of amusement and admiration. "It's the only way I'll survive," Maya replied, dark humor tinging her exhaustion. At 6 weeks postpartum, Maya insisted on returning to work at the clinic. Dr. Chen converted a storage room into a makeshift nursery where the triplets could stay while Maya worked. During their naps, she juggled patient scheduling, insurance claims, and further development of her medical management system, now progressing from sketches to actual code as she taught herself programming during the night hours. The triplets grew from fragile newborns to determined infants. At 6 months, they began showing distinct personalities that would only become more pronounced with time. Trinity developed language skills early, babbling constantly as if practicing for future conversations. Ivy showed remarkable pattern recognition, arranging her blocks by color before she could even sit independently. Kennedy demonstrated extraordinary spatial awareness, figuring out how toys fit together and came apart with uncanny precision. Maya captured these moments on the second-hand digital camera Dr. Chen had given her. Each night, she created a digital diary entry, documenting their development alongside her own progress on the management system. "I want them to know someday how far we've come," she explained when Dr. Chen found her coding at 3 in the morning, Trinity asleep on her chest. "They'll know because you'll tell them," Dr. Chen said gently. "But they need you alive to do that. You must rest, Maya." Rest, however, remained an elusive luxury. The triplets' first year passed in a blur of milestones and challenges. Their first teeth emerged simultaneously, leading to 3 weeks of sleepless nights. They crawled within days of each other, suddenly transforming the house into a danger zone requiring constant vigilance. Their first birthday arrived with little fanfare, a small cupcake each, a few presents from Dr. Chen, and Maya's silent promise that future celebrations would be more memorable. When the girls turned 2, Dr. Chen made her most significant proposal yet. Over dinner, after the triplets had been tucked into their beds, she placed legal documents on the table. "I've been thinking about this for some time," she began carefully. "You and the girls have become my family in every way that matters. I'd like to make it official." Maya stared at the adoption papers, emotion closing her throat. "I would be honored to be your mother on paper, as I already am in my heart," Dr. Chen continued, her usual composure wavering. "You would become Maya Washington Chen, and I would have legal rights regarding the girls if anything ever happened to you." Tears spilled down Maya's cheeks. After years of abandonment, first by Jackson, then by family members who considered her pregnancy a disgrace, here was someone choosing to bind their life permanently to hers. "Yes," she whispered, reaching for Dr. Chen's hand. "The girls should have a grandmother who loves them as much as you do." The adoption was finalized 3 months later. That night, they took a rare family photo. Dr. Chen, now legally Maya's mother, holding Kennedy. Maya with Trinity and Ivy on either side. They framed it and placed it prominently in the living room, the first official portrait of the Washington Chen family. As the triplets approached their 3rd birthday, Maya's management system progressed from theoretical concept to working prototype. late nights of coding had produced a functional platform that integrated patient records, appointment scheduling, insurance processing, and prescription management. Dr. Chen's small practice served as the testing ground, with immediate improvements in efficiency. "This could help thousands of clinics like mine," Dr. Chen remarked, watching Maya fine-tune the system one evening. "Community healthcare operates on such tight margins. Anything that saves time ultimately saves lives." "It needs investment to reach its potential," Maya admitted. "The infrastructure requirements alone would cost more than we can manage." Dr. Chen was silent for a moment. "I might know someone who could help. An old medical school classmate who's now in venture capital, focusing on healthcare innovation." 2 weeks later, Maya found herself presenting her prototype to Victor Lamont, a serious man in his 60s who specialized in early-stage healthcare investments. She had prepared meticulously, creating detailed slides and practicing her pitch for days. What she hadn't anticipated was Trinity, Ivy, and Kennedy, now 3 years old and fiercely independent, insisting on helping Mommy with her important meeting. Despite Maya's efforts to arrange childcare, all three had developed sudden, simultaneous attachment anxiety that morning. "I'm so sorry," Maya apologized as she set up her presentation, the triplets solemnly arranging themselves on the office floor with coloring books. "This isn't very professional." Lamont's expression remained neutral. "Proceed." For the next 30 minutes, Maya outlined her system's capabilities, market potential, and implementation strategy. Throughout, the triplets remained surprisingly quiet, occasionally whispering among themselves but otherwise absorbed in their activities. As Maya concluded, Lamont asked pointed questions about scalability, security protocols, and revenue models. She answered each precisely, her business degree and years of practical experience in healthcare administration giving her unexpected confidence. "And what would you do with an initial investment of $50,000? Lamont finally asked. Maya had prepared for this question. "Hire a developer to professionalize the code base, secure proper hosting infrastructure, and create a pilot implementation for 3 additional practices to prove scalability." Lamont nodded, making a brief note. Then, surprisingly, he turned to the triplets. "And what do you young ladies think of your mother's project?" Trinity, always the spokesperson, looked up from her coloring. "Mommy's computer helps sick people get better faster." Ivy added, "It has patterns that make things work right." Kennedy, typically the quietest, contributed, "And someday it will help everybody, not just Dr. Chen's patients." Lamont's serious expression cracked slightly. "Well-informed associates you have, Ms. Washington Chen." He stood, extending his hand. "I'll have the paperwork drawn up. $50,000 for 20% equity seems fair for this stage." After he left, Maya stood frozen in disbelief until Dr. Chen rushed in. "Well, what happened?" "He's investing," Maya whispered. $50,000. That evening, after the triplets were asleep, Maya created a special ritual to mark the occasion. She brought out the patent application she'd prepared for her system and added a special section listing Assistant Innovators. With washable markers, she helped each triplet make a colorful handprint beside their typed names, Trinity, Ivy, and Kennedy Washington Chen, officially recognizing them as co-inventors. "One day," she told them as they admired their handiwork, "people will know your names for the things you create and the problems you solve." The investment transformed Maya's prototype from passion project to legitimate business. Over the next 2 years, Washington Health Systems grew from concept to functioning product with implementations in 5 community clinics. The triplets, now 5 years old, spent their days alternating between kindergarten and the small office Maya had established 3 blocks from their home. While other children their age played with toys, the Washington Chen triplets grew up surrounded by computers, whiteboards, and the constant hum of a startup finding its footing. Trinity developed an uncanny ability to charm visitors, often serving as an impromptu receptionist. Ivy organized the office supplies with mathematical precision, creating inventory systems that adults found themselves adopting. Kennedy spent hours disassembling and reassembling office electronics, frequently improving their functionality in the process. Just as the business began gaining real traction, Dr. Chen received devastating news: stage 4 pancreatic cancer, already metastasized. The prognosis was measured in months, not years. "I don't want intervention," she told Maya firmly after the diagnosis. "Quality of time, not quantity." The following months were a delicate balance of building the business while making every moment count with Dr. Chen. The triplets, despite their young age, seemed to understand the gravity of the situation. They took turns reading to their grandmother, showing remarkable patience as her energy waned. On her final night, Dr. Chen called Maya to her bedside while the girls slept. "I've updated my will," she said, her voice weakened but resolute. "The house, my savings, the clinic, everything goes to you and the girls." "Please don't talk this way," Maya pleaded, holding her adopted mother's fragile hand. "Listen to me," Dr. Chen insisted. "You've created something important with your system. Promise me you'll continue. Promise you'll save lives through technology, as I tried to do through medicine." "I promise," Maya whispered, tears falling freely. Dr. Chen died peacefully in her sleep that night. At the funeral, Maya and the triplets stood hand in hand before the casket, a quartet of shared grief and determination. Dr. Marcus Chen, Amelia's younger brother, stood beside them, his own eyes red-rimmed. "My sister saw something special in you, in all of you," he told Maya after the service. "I'm a pediatric surgeon at Mount Sinai. If you or the girls ever need anything at all, I'm here." As they lowered Dr. Chen's casket into the ground, 5-year-old Trinity spoke clearly in the silence. "Don't worry, Grandma. We'll remember everything you taught us." Ivy added solemnly, "We'll take care of Mom." Kennedy, always one for practical solutions, concluded, "And we'll change the world, just like you wanted." The modest financial legacy Dr. Chen left behind would seem insignificant to many, but in Maya's hands it would become the seed of an empire that, a decade later, would rival Manhattan's largest corporations, including Reynolds Enterprises. The gentle morning sunlight filtered through the blinds as Maya stood in the empty storefront, keys clutched tightly in her hand. The echo of her footsteps against the bare concrete floor seemed to punctuate the magnitude of this moment. 6 months after Dr. Chen's funeral, Maya was signing the lease on the first official headquarters of Washington Innovations in a modest building on the edge of the Bronx. "What do you think, girls?" she asked, turning to the triplets who were exploring the space with the boundless energy of 5-year-olds. "It's big!" Trinity exclaimed, her voice bouncing off the walls. "It needs computers," Ivy observed practically, already mentally organizing the space. Kennedy walked to the windows, pressing her small palm against the glass. "We can see the bus stop from here, the bus that's always late." Maya smiled at Kennedy's observation. Transportation had become an increasing frustration over the past months as she juggled the growing business, 3 children, and the daily logistics of life without a car. Just last week, she had missed an important meeting with a potential client when the bus simply failed to appear, leaving her stranded for 45 minutes in the rain with the girls. The real estate agent coughed politely from the doorway. "Whenever you're ready to sign, Ms. Washington Chen." The lease signing was both terrifying and exhilarating. The modest inheritance from Dr. Chen had allowed Maya to transition her medical management system from concept to viable product, but this physical space represented a commitment beyond software. She was building a company. Within weeks, the empty storefront transformed. Second-hand desks and chairs filled the main area, refurbished computers hummed along the walls, and a small corner was designated as the Girls' Lab, complete with books, educational tablets, and a miniature whiteboard where the triplets could work on their own projects during school holidays. Maya's first 5 employees came from the community, a coding student from the local community college, 2 recent graduates who had been patients at Dr. Chen's clinic, a former administrative assistant laid off from a hospital downsizing, and a retired nurse with surprising aptitude for data analysis. They were an unlikely team, united by the mission Maya articulated during their first staff meeting. "We're not just building software," she told them, standing before the Washington Innovations logo freshly painted on the wall. "We're creating access where there wasn't any before, starting with healthcare, but that's just the beginning." The medical management system gained traction throughout the year, with 10 small clinics implementing the software. The revenue was modest but sustainable, allowing Maya to pay her small team and reinvest in development. Yet something continued to nag at her, a persistent feeling that she was addressing only part of a larger systemic problem. The realization came one rainy Tuesday evening as Maya rushed to catch the last bus home, the triplets trailing behind her like ducklings, all four drenched despite sharing a single umbrella. The bus, predictably, failed to arrive on schedule. "That's the third time this week," Maya muttered, checking her watch as the rain soaked through her shoes. Kennedy was coughing, Trinity's teeth were chattering, and Ivy was calculating aloud how many minutes they had stood at this particular bus stop over the past month. When they finally arrived home, nearly an hour late and thoroughly soaked, Maya tucked the girls into bed and then sat at her kitchen table, staring into space. Transportation wasn't just an inconvenience, it was a critical barrier to healthcare access for the communities she served. Patients missed appointments not because they didn't care, but because they couldn't reliably get to clinics. Medical staff worked reduced hours because commuting consumed so much of their day. "What if," she whispered to herself, pulling her laptop closer, "what if we applied our management system to public transportation?" The idea consumed her. For the next 2 weeks, Maya worked through the nights, adapting her healthcare algorithms to transportation logistics. The principles were surprisingly transferable: resource allocation, scheduling optimization, predictive analytics for usage patterns. By the time she presented the concept to her team, the framework for an integrated urban mobility platform had taken shape. "Transportation isn't a luxury, it's a basic right," Maya argued during her presentation to the Bronx Community Council 3 months later. "People can't access education, employment, or healthcare if they can't physically get there reliably." The council members, many of whom relied on the same unreliable transit system, were receptive but skeptical. "Sounds promising," said Councilwoman Rodriguez, "but how do you plan to implement this without city approval and infrastructure access?" Maya had anticipated this question. "We start small. One neighborhood, one bus route, with our own shuttle supplements where gaps exist. We prove the concept works, then scale with partners." To Maya's surprise, the council approved a pilot program for the Washington Mobility Initiative in the South Bronx. The grant was modest, barely enough to lease 2 passenger vans and hire drivers, but it was a start. As the business expanded beyond healthcare into transportation, the triplets, now 6 years old, became increasingly integrated into the company's daily operations. During summer break, Maya created a structured internship program for her daughters, rotating them through different departments to observe and learn. Trinity shadowed Maya during community meetings, absorbing the nuances of persuasion and relationship building. Her natural charm and articulate speech, advanced far beyond her years, made her a favorite among clients and partners. "You're a natural communicator," Maya told Trinity after watching her 6-year-old daughter confidently explain their shuttle tracking app to an elderly resident. "You help people understand complex ideas." Ivy gravitated toward the finance department, her mathematical aptitude allowing her to spot patterns in spreadsheets that sometimes eluded the adults. During one quarterly review, she pointed to a sequence of numbers and asked, "Why do these go up every third Friday?" The finance director investigated and discovered a billing anomaly that had cost the company thousands. "How did you see that?" she asked Ivy in amazement. The 6-year-old shrugged. "Numbers are like music. When they don't sound right, I notice." Kennedy, the inventor of the trio, spent hours in the engineering lab, observing and absorbing technical knowledge. She began sketching improvements to the shuttle tracking devices, including a simplified interface for users without smartphones. "If Grandma can't use it, it's not finished yet," Kennedy explained seriously when presenting her drawings to the development team. By the time the triplets turned 7, Washington Innovations had expanded to 25 employees. The mobility initiative had grown from 2 vans to a coordinated network of 15 vehicles integrated with public transit, serving 4 Bronx neighborhoods. Patient attendance at partner clinics had increased 62%, and the company had attracted attention from community development organizations across the city. The first major media coverage came when the New York Community Trust featured Washington Innovations in their annual report. A local newspaper picked up the story, running a profile titled "From Personal Tragedy to Community Transformation: How Maya Washington Chen is Revolutionizing Access for Underserved Communities." The article highlighted Maya's journey as a single mother of triplets building a social enterprise from scratch. Accompanying photos showed Maya with her daughters in their office, all 4 with matching determined expressions that made readers write admiring letters about the future of female leadership. As the company grew, so did outside interest. When the triplets were 8, Maya received her first acquisition offer, a 7-figure proposal from a healthcare conglomerate interested in the patient management system. "This is an incredible opportunity," her newly hired business development director argued. "The exit multiple is generous for a company at our stage." Maya called a board meeting, which at that point consisted of herself, Dr. Marcus Chen, who had become a trusted advisor, and Victor Lamont, their initial investor. She brought the triplets as observers, a practice she had established to expose them to business decision-making. "This company isn't for sale," Maya stated firmly. "Not now, not ever. We're building something that needs to remain independent to fulfill its mission." When the triplets were 9, Washington Innovations had grown to 50 employees, 60% of whom were women, 70% people of color, and over half from the communities they served. The company now occupied 3 floors of their building, with the mobility initiative generating more revenue than the original healthcare system. Maya made a point of hiring single parents, creating flexible work arrangements, and an on-site childcare center that the triplets helped design. "No one should have to choose between being a good parent and being able to work," she explained when questioned about the cost. "These aren't perks, they're necessities." As the company approached its 5th anniversary, an unexpected opportunity arose. The city of New York announced a major request for proposals to revitalize transportation in historically underserved boroughs. The contract, worth $30 million over 3 years, would be the largest municipal transportation initiative in decades. "We have to bid," Maya announced to her leadership team. "This is exactly what we've been building toward." For 6 weeks, Washington Innovations worked around the clock preparing their proposal. The triplets, now 10, insisted on contributing. Trinity helped craft community impact statements, Ivy analyzed financial projections, and Kennedy developed a miniature physical model of their proposed hub-and-spoke system. The night before the submission deadline, the office hummed with nervous energy as final documents were proofread and assembled. The triplets eventually fell asleep under desks, surrounded by presentation boards and technical specifications. At dawn, Maya submitted the completed proposal, 372 pages representing everything they had built and learned over 5 years. As she walked out of the municipal building, exhaustion and uncertainty washed over her. They were competing against established corporations with decades of experience and political connections. 2 weeks later, Maya gathered her team to watch the live stream of the contract announcement. The triplets sat cross-legged on the floor in front of the projection screen, holding hands in a chain of solidarity. After thorough evaluation of all submissions, the Commissioner of Transportation announced, "The selection committee has determined that Washington Innovations presented the most innovative and economically viable proposal for the city's transportation revitalization initiative." The office erupted in cheers. Maya stood momentarily frozen, absorbing the magnitude of what had just happened, before being swarmed by jubilant employees and 3 ecstatic daughters. That evening, after the celebration had wound down, Maya raised a glass of non-alcoholic cider in a private toast with her core team and the Triplets. "To all the doors that were closed to us," she said, her voice steady with emotion, "thank you for forcing us to build our own house." As she signed the $30 million municipal contract, Maya had no idea that her name had been mentioned for the first time in the boardroom of Reynolds Enterprises, with Jackson Reynolds asking irritably, "Who the hell is this Maya Washington Chen who's encroaching on our territory?" The name Maya Washington Chen drifted through the Reynolds Enterprises boardroom like an unwelcome specter, leaving Jackson Reynolds visibly unsettled as he loosened his Italian silk tie. 5 years had passed since that municipal contract had first put Maya's company on his radar, and now her name seemed to haunt every major business publication and development proposal that crossed his desk. In those 5 years, Washington Innovations had transformed from a promising urban mobility startup to a powerhouse reshaping how cities functioned. The glass and steel headquarters that now dominated a prime corner of downtown Manhattan stood as physical testament to that meteoric rise. Inside that building, Maya Washington Chen stood before floor-to-ceiling windows, gazing at the skyline she was actively redesigning. "The Chicago implementation is 3 weeks ahead of schedule," reported her chief operations officer, sliding a tablet across the polished conference table. "And Boston just approved our proposal for the South End revitalization." Maya nodded, her reflection in the window revealing a woman transformed from the devastated young mother of 15 years ago. At 40, she carried herself with the quiet confidence that came from building something substantial from nothing. Her tailored Armani suit replaced the second-hand clothes she once wore to job interviews, and the simple emerald pendant at her throat, a gift from the Triplets on their 10th birthday, caught the morning light. $8.7 billion in confirmed contracts with 5 major American metropolitan areas, she murmured, adjusting the emerald brooch on her Versace dress. Impressive numbers for a Bronx girl with community college education, wouldn't you say? Her executive team exchanged knowing glances. Though Maya rarely referenced her past, they understood the fire that drove her. The company's spectacular growth spoke volumes about her determination to prove wrong everyone who had ever underestimated her. The intercom chimed softly. "Ms. Washington Chen, your helicopter is ready on the rooftop. The girls are already aboard." Maya gathered her presentation materials for the prestigious Future Forward charity ball at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Tonight, she would be the keynote speaker, receiving the Innovator of the Year award for Washington Innovations' revolutionary approach to sustainable urban transportation. The irony wasn't lost on her that this was the same award Jackson Reynolds had received a decade earlier for his eco-luxury developments, projects that now seemed superficial compared to the fundamental infrastructure changes her company was implementing. The elevator whisked her to the rooftop helipad where the company's sleek helicopter waited, its black exterior emblazoned with the distinctive teal Washington Innovations logo. Inside, Trinity, Ivy, and Kennedy were already settled, each absorbed in final preparations for the evening. At 14, the Triplets had blossomed into extraordinary young women, each developing distinct talents that complemented their mother's vision. They attended the elite Gardner Academy on full academic scholarships, but spent every afternoon and weekend at Washington Innovations, where they had become integral to the company's operations. "Mom, the press is already positioned," Trinity informed her through the communication system as the helicopter lifted off. Already accepted early to Stanford for strategic communications, Trinity had developed an uncanny ability to navigate media relationships. At 12, she had negotiated her first corporate partnership for the company's educational initiative, charming executives 3 times her age. Ivy, the financial strategist of the trio, added, "The financial reports from last quarter have been distributed. Forbes is particularly interested in our advance over Reynolds Enterprises in the sustainable urban development sector." The mention of Reynolds caused Maya's hand to tighten imperceptibly on her tablet. Though she never discussed Jackson with her daughters, his company had increasingly become their direct competition, a fact that business publications frequently noted with thinly veiled fascination about the mysterious connection between Washington Chen and Reynolds. Kennedy, the natural scientist and inventor among the sisters, was busy adjusting miniature prototypes they would present after Maya's speech. "The models are ready. The simulation will show how our system reduces emissions by 87% compared to traditional infrastructures." Each of the Washington triplets had emerged as extraordinary in her own field. Trinity's communications skills had caught the attention of Stanford's admissions committee 2 years before she could apply. Ivy had received a special invitation from MIT for their advanced computational economics program. Kennedy was destined for Harvard, where she would research sustainable materials for urban transport, all three charting academic paths that would have seemed impossible given their beginnings. The girls had never known their biological father. For them, the only male role model had been Dr. Marcus Chen, who served as mentor and father figure after his sister's death when the triplets were 7. His guidance, particularly in navigating the scientific and medical communities, had been invaluable as Washington innovations expanded into health transport integration systems. "We're approaching the Met, Ms. Washington Chen," the pilot announced as the helicopter began its descent toward the museum's designated helipad. Below, among the guests observing the aircraft's arrival, stood Jackson Reynolds, now 45 and increasingly viewed as a dinosaur in the real estate market struggling to remain relevant in the sustainability era. He tightened his grip on the arm of his trophy wife, Veronica Huntington Reynolds, as he watched the Washington Innovations logo, the same company that had systematically outbid his on-public contracts for the past 3 years. "That's her who's been ruining our business," he muttered to the associate beside him. "Who would have thought that naive girl would become our biggest competitor?" What Jackson didn't know was that the woman he had abandoned pregnant now commanded an empire valued at $12.3 billion, employing more than 7,800 people, most from historically marginalized communities. Washington Innovations had revolutionized not just urban transportation but how cities planned their growth, exactly the sector that Reynolds Enterprises had considered its exclusive territory. When the helicopter door opened, Maya emerged with the confidence of someone who had earned her place in the world through hard work and vision. Her emerald Versace gown captured the evening light, the fabric flowing like water as she descended the steps with studied elegance. But what happened next made Jackson Reynolds nearly drop his champagne flute. 3 identical teenagers emerged from the helicopter after Maya, each wearing an impeccable outfit in colors complementing their mothers. Even from a distance, it was impossible not to notice the resemblance between the 4. The same face shape, the same expressive eyes, the same determined chin that Jackson used to consider too stubborn in Maya. "Who are they?" Veronica asked, unconsciously sensing the threat represented by Maya and her daughter's majestic presence. "No idea," Jackson lied, as a chill of recognition ran down his spine. Inside the museum, the Future Forward charity ball gathered New York's business, political, and social elite. Governors, senators, and Fortune 500 CEOs mingled in an environment of calculated opulence, all eager to associate their images with the most prestigious causes of the moment. Maya navigated the hall with the ease of someone who belonged in that environment, though she had never forgotten her origins. Each handshake, each brief conversation was a strategic opportunity to advance Washington Innovations' mission. "Governor Richards, what a pleasure to see you again," she greeted with genuine warmth. "I hope the pilot numbers from the Bronx impressed your team." "Impressive would be an understatement, Ms. Washington Chen," the politician replied. 64% reduction in commute time and 91% in station crime. New York State is ready to expand the program. From across the hall, Jackson Reynolds observed the interaction, bitterly realizing how the same politicians who once courted him now gravitated toward Maya like planets around the sun. Reynolds Enterprises, once dominant in New York real estate development, had lost 5 consecutive major contracts to Washington Innovations over the past 2 years. As the evening progressed, Jackson learned that Maya would be the keynote speaker, receiving the prestigious Innovator of the Year award for her revolutionary work in sustainable urban transportation, the same award he had received 10 years earlier for his eco-luxury development that, in retrospect, seemed superficial compared to Maya's genuine innovations. What he still didn't know was that fate had orchestrated more than a simple reunion for that night. The gears of cosmic justice were in motion, setting the stage for a confrontation that would forever change the power balance between them. Maya excused herself from a conversation with the mayor to check her presentation one final time. Finding a quiet corner near the bar, she reviewed her talking points while sipping sparkling water. Her speech would unveil Washington Innovations' most ambitious project yet, an integrated transportation grid designed to connect historically isolated neighborhoods with employment centers, reducing commute times by 60% while cutting carbon emissions by 75%. "Mom," Trinity's voice came through her discreet earpiece. "Senator Martinez wants to confirm the Chicago implementation details before your speech." "I'll find him in 5 minutes," Maya replied. "Where are your sisters?" "Ivy's discussing the municipal bond structure with the state comptroller, and Kennedy is showing the MIT engineering team our new materials prototype." Maya smiled with pride. At 14, her daughters moved through this world of power and influence with remarkable poise, never forgetting the values she had instilled in them. That privilege came with responsibility, and that innovation without compassion was meaningless. A server approached with a fresh, sparkling water, and Maya thanked him, remembering her own days carrying trays at events like this. She made a point of learning the names of service staff wherever she went, a practice that often raised eyebrows among her corporate peers but earned fierce loyalty from workers at all levels. Across the room, Jackson Reynolds watched Maya with growing agitation. The Washington Innovations display near the entrance featured a holographic model of their integrated transportation system, the very project that had cost Reynolds Enterprises the Brooklyn waterfront development contract. His company's proposal, focused on luxury condominiums with token sustainability features, had been rejected in favor of Maya's comprehensive neighborhood revitalization plan. "She's turned the entire industry against us," he complained to Veronica, who was more interested in being photographed with celebrities than listening to her husband's business grievances. Using this diversity and inclusion narrative to undercut established developers. Veronica's attention drifted to the Washington Triplets, who were now surrounded by admiring guests. "Those girls look familiar somehow," she mused. "Aren't they on the cover of Teen Vogue this month? Something about young entrepreneurs?" Jackson didn't respond, his gaze fixed on Maya as she graciously accepted congratulations from the governor. The contrast between them couldn't have been more stark. While his company struggled with declining relevance and mounting debt, she had become the darling of both Wall Street and social impact investors. The event coordinator approached Maya, informing her it was time to prepare for her keynote address. As she made her way toward the backstage area, Jackson impulsively decided he needed another drink. He headed for the bar, his path intersecting with Maya's for the first time in 15 years. As the helicopter of Washington Innovations approached the Metropolitan Museum, Maya didn't imagine that, among the guests looking up, was Jackson Reynolds, the man who had discarded her as inadequate 15 years earlier, now bitterly watching the logo of the company that was systematically defeating his own. The glass elevator ascended to the museum's second floor, carrying Maya toward the staging area for her keynote address. Her mind was already rehearsing key points of her presentation when the doors opened to reveal the opulent reception hall. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over New York's elite, their jewelry catching the light like constellations against dark suits and designer gowns. Maya stepped forward confidently, nodding at familiar faces as she navigated through the crowd. The Washington Innovations helicopter landing had created exactly the impression she'd intended, not as a show of ostentation, but as a demonstration of their revolutionary vertical mobility technology powered entirely by sustainable energy. The triplets had insisted on arriving this way, eager to showcase the prototype they'd helped refine over the past year. "Ms. Washington Chen!" called out the mayor of Philadelphia, approaching with outstretched hand. "Just the person I wanted to see. Your implementation in our South District has transformed the community. Crime down 40%, local business revenue up 63% in just 8 months." Maya smiled warmly, clasping his hand. "The credit goes to the community members on our advisory board. They knew exactly what their neighborhoods needed. We just provided the tools." As she continued her circuit through the room, Maya felt rather than saw the stares following her. Her emerald Versace gown, a splurge she'd justified as an investment in the company's image, contrasted dramatically with the muted palettes favored by most of the society women present. The dress whispered of confidence rather than screamed for attention, its elegance underscored by the single emerald brooch at her shoulder. Across the expansive hall, Jackson Reynolds stood rigid beside a marble column, his fourth champagne clutched too tightly in manicured fingers. His gaze bored into Maya's back as she graciously accepted congratulations from the governor of New York, the same governor who had canceled Reynolds Enterprises' waterfront development permit last quarter. "She's certainly making an impression," remarked Charles Huntington, Veronica's father and a significant Reynolds Enterprises investor. "Wasn't Washington Innovations just a healthcare startup a few years ago? Now they're revolutionizing urban infrastructure." Jackson took another swallow of champagne. "It's all smoke and mirrors. They've leveraged diversity grants and social impact investments to undercut legitimate developers who actually understand the market." Charles raised an eyebrow. "The market seems to understand them just fine. Their stock is up 86% this year." Before Jackson could respond, a ripple of interest moved through the crowd as the Washington triplets entered the main hall. They moved with synchronized grace, each dressed in a complementary jewel tone that echoed their mother's emerald: Trinity in sapphire, Ivy in amethyst, Kennedy in ruby. Their identical faces bore the unmistakable blend of Maya's features and, though few in the room realized it, Jackson's bone structure and bearing. "Those girls look remarkably like their mother," Charles observed, "though there's something familiar about them I can't quite place." Jackson drained his champagne, signaling to a passing server for another. "Probably just good genetics," he muttered, adjusting his collar uncomfortably. Trinity, ever the communications strategist, guided her sisters through the crowd with practiced ease. At 14, she already possessed the social intelligence of someone twice her age, knowing exactly which conversations to join and which to politely avoid. Ivy kept mental notes of potential investors, calculating probabilities and projected returns with each handshake. Kennedy observed the museum's architecture, mentally redesigning elements for improved energy efficiency. Maya watched her daughters with quiet pride from across the room. They had grown into extraordinary young women despite, or perhaps because of, the challenges they'd faced. Dr. Marcus Chen, standing nearby as Maya's guest for the evening, followed her gaze with equal admiration. "Amelia would be so proud of all of you," he said softly, mentioning his late sister. "She always believed you would change the world." Maya squeezed his arm affectionately. "We couldn't have done it without her, or you. You've been the only father figure the girls have ever known." Marcus's expression grew serious. "Speaking of fathers, isn't that Jackson Reynolds by the bar? I recognize him from those business magazine profiles." Maya's posture stiffened slightly, though her expression remained neutral. "Yes, it is. I knew he might be here tonight." "Have you ever told him about the girls?" "He made his choice 15 years ago," Maya replied evenly. "He signed away his rights before they were even born." Before Marcus could respond, the event coordinator approached, gently touching Maya's elbow. Ms. Washington Chen, we're ready for you backstage. The award presentation will begin in 20 minutes. Maya nodded, excusing herself from Marcus and making her way toward the service corridor that led backstage. As she passed near the bar, she maintained her focus forward, determined not to acknowledge Jackson's presence. She had almost reached the corridor when she heard the triplets calling for her. "Mom!" Trinity's voice carried over the crowd. "Senator Martinez wants a quick word before your speech." Maya paused, turning back toward her daughters. In that moment, Jackson Reynolds stepped directly into her path, champagne glass in hand and a strange mixture of resentment and curiosity in his eyes. "Maya Washington," he said, deliberately omitting her adopted surname. What an unexpected ascent. 15 years compressed into a single heartbeat as Maya looked into the face of the man who had discarded her and their unborn children. His once sharp features had softened with age and excess. The confident gleam in his eyes now replaced by something harder and more desperate. The bespoke suit that once seemed to embody success now appeared as costume rather than confidence. "Mr. Reynolds," she acknowledged with professional courtesy, her voice betraying none of the emotions churning beneath her composed exterior. "If you'll excuse me, I'm needed backstage." "Of course," he replied, stepping slightly closer. "Always rushing somewhere important now, aren't you? The great innovator, transforming communities." His tone carried an unmistakable edge of mockery. Maya's response was interrupted by the arrival of the triplets, who moved as one to flank their mother. The collective gasp from nearby guests was audible as the four women stood together, the genetic connection between them unmistakable even to strangers. Jackson froze, his champagne glass suspended halfway to his lips as he took in the three teenagers. The resemblance was undeniable, not just to Maya, but to himself. He saw his mother's cheekbones, his own eyes replicated 3 times over, his grandfather's distinctive chin. "Mom?" Trinity said smoothly, seemingly oblivious to Jackson's shocked stare. "Senator Martinez is waiting in the East Gallery whenever you're ready. Tell him I'll be there shortly, sweetheart," Maya replied, maintaining perfect composure despite the tension crackling in the air. Jackson couldn't tear his gaze from the triplets. These are your daughters?" he finally managed, his voice uncharacteristically unsteady. "Yes," Maya answered simply. "Trinity, Ivy, and Kennedy Washington Chen. Girls, this is Mr. Reynolds, CEO of Reynolds Enterprises." The triplets offered polite but reserved smiles, having been raised with impeccable manners. None showed any sign of recognizing the significance of this particular introduction. "Washington Chen," Jackson repeated, emphasizing the hyphenated surname with thinly veiled confusion. "Dr. Amelia Chen legally adopted me before her passing," Maya explained, offering no further details about the adoption's timing or circumstances. "Now, if you'll excuse us, duty calls." As Maya guided her daughters away, Jackson stood rooted to the spot, his mind racing to process what he had just witnessed. 3 daughters, identical triplets who would be approximately 14 years old, exactly the right age to be the children Maya had been carrying when he'd cast her aside. Nearby guests, sensing drama, observed with poorly disguised interest. Veronica materialized at Jackson's side, her artificial smile firmly in place, though her eyes darted questioningly between her husband and the retreating figures of Maya and the triplets. "Who was that?" she asked, slipping her arm through his possessively. "No one important," Jackson muttered, though his pallor and shaking hand suggested otherwise. "Just a former acquaintance." From across the room, Marcus Chen had observed the entire exchange. He now approached Jackson with deliberate casualness, positioning himself within earshot as Jackson downed the remainder of his champagne. "They're remarkable girls, aren't they?" Marcus commented to no one in particular, though his words were clearly intended for Jackson. Already accepted to Stanford, MIT, and Harvard, respectively, Trinity negotiated her first corporate partnership at 12. Ivy's financial algorithms are being studied by economists twice her age, and Kennedy's sustainable material patents are revolutionizing urban development. Jackson turned sharply, recognizing the intentional nature of this information. "And you are?" "Dr. Marcus Chen, brother of the late Dr. Amelia Chen, uncle to the Washington Chen triplets." He extended his hand with professional courtesy. "I believe you knew my sister's adopted daughter many years ago." Jackson ignored the outstretched hand. "That's ancient history." Marcus withdrew his hand smoothly. "Funny thing about history, Mr. Reynolds, it has a way of revealing itself at the most unexpected moments." As Marcus walked away, Jackson signaled for yet another champagne. The alcohol couldn't dull the mounting realization that his past actions had created consequences far beyond what he'd imagined. Those three brilliant, poised young women. They carried his DNA, his family legacy, yet bore another man's name. Meanwhile, backstage, Maya reviewed her presentation slides one final time while the triplets arranged the prototype models they would unveil during the demonstration portion of her speech. "Are you nervous?" Kennedy asked, adjusting a miniature transportation hub with meticulous precision. "Not about the speech," Maya admitted. "It's seeing him again after all these years." Trinity placed a reassuring hand on her mother's shoulder. "He doesn't matter anymore, Mom. Look at everything we've built without him." Ivy, ever practical, added, "Statistically speaking, his company is approximately 18 months from requiring significant restructuring or acquisition. His last 3 development projects have failed to secure adequate funding." Maya smiled at her daughters, drawing strength from their presence. "When did you 3 become so wise?" "We had an excellent teacher," Trinity replied with a grin. The stage manager appeared, clipboard in hand. "5 minutes, Ms. Washington Chen. The governor is about to begin your introduction." Maya straightened her shoulders, adjusting her emerald brooch one final time. Tonight's presentation would unveil Washington Innovation's most ambitious project yet, a comprehensive urban mobility system that would connect 5 major cities, creating economic corridors between historically isolated communities. As she waited in the wings, Maya caught a glimpse of Jackson taking a seat in the audience, his expression still stunned from their encounter. The sight no longer stirred the pain it once would have. Instead, she felt a strange sense of completion, a circle closing after 15 years. When the governor announced her name, applause filled the grand hall. Maya stepped into the spotlight with the confidence of someone who had fought for every inch of ground she now commanded. Behind her, 3 brilliant daughters prepared to showcase their contributions to a vision that was reshaping America's urban landscape. While Maya walked toward the stage, she didn't notice that Jackson was moving purposefully in her direction, the same man who 15 years earlier had declared she would never belong in this world, now about to discover how profoundly the universe appreciated irony. Maya's presentation had been flawless, her poised delivery earning a standing ovation from the packed ballroom. As the crowd dispersed for intermission before the award ceremony, she found herself momentarily alone at the bar, waiting for a spritz of elderflower without alcohol. The momentary solitude was welcome, a chance to center herself after the emotional turbulence of seeing Jackson again. She closed her eyes briefly, inhaling deeply as she mentally prepared for the second half of the evening. Always the Bronx girl trying to show off. The voice behind her carried 15 years of disdain compressed into 8 words. Maya felt an involuntary chill run down her spine before she even turned around. That cadence, that particular tone of aristocratic condescension, it had haunted her darkest memories for years before she'd finally exorcised it. Maya turned slowly, her emerald gown catching the light as she pivoted to face Jackson Reynolds. He stood less than a meter away, clutching an expensive champagne flute, his Italian suit impeccably tailored yet somehow failing to conceal the beginnings of a middle-aged paunch. Beside him, Veronica Huntington Reynolds observed the scene with evident discomfort, her surgically enhanced features struggling to maintain a neutral expression. "Jackson," Maya acknowledged, her voice carrying a calm that surprised even herself. How unexpected! Unexpected is seeing how far someone can get playing the diversity and inclusion game, he retorted, malice barely disguised in his tone. But I can see from your security detail that you still fear not belonging in this world. What Jackson failed to immediately register was that the entire salon had fallen silent. The tension in the air was palpable as all eyes converged on their confrontation. The governor of New York, 3 senators, and dozens of influential CEOs watched intently, many discreetly activating smartphone recording functions. "Mr. Reynolds?" Maya responded, her serene voice echoing in the sudden silence. "While you were busy losing 62% of Reynolds Enterprises' market value over the past 2 decades, I built something that actually matters to ordinary people." Jackson laughed nervously, belatedly noticing the attention they had attracted. "Ordinary people don't fly in helicopters, Maya." "No, but they deserve safe, accessible, sustainable transportation," she countered, something your limited vision of urban development never comprehended. It was at this precise moment that the Washington Triplets approached, each carrying tablets displaying graphs and projections. Jackson's face visibly paled at the sight of the 3 teenagers side by side. It was like facing a triple mirror reflecting the past, showing him the magnitude of his betrayal in perfect genetic symmetry. "Mother," Trinity interrupted with calculated precision, "Senator Martinez would like to confirm the details of the Chicago implementation." "One moment, darling," Maya responded before turning back to Jackson. "Allow me to introduce my daughters, Trinity, Ivy, and Kennedy Washington." She paused deliberately. "Our daughters, actually." The murmur that swept through the salon was instantaneous. Veronica took a step backward, shocked by the revelation. Nearby, a Wall Street Journal reporter discreetly activated the recorder on his smartphone. That's not possible," Jackson stammered, his aristocratic composure crumbling rapidly. "Identical triplets," Maya continued, unperturbed. "Trinity was accepted early to Stanford at 14. Ivy develops financial algorithms your research department wouldn't comprehend. And Kennedy recently patented a sustainable material that will render 60% of your ecological projects obsolete." Ivy stepped forward, extending her tablet toward Jackson. "Actually, Mr. Reynolds, I thought you might be interested to know that Washington Innovations recently acquired 38% of Reynolds Enterprises' corporate debt through our investment subsidiary." The color drained completely from Jackson's face. "What?" "In simple terms," Ivy continued with the same clinical precision of a surgeon, "my mother is now your largest private creditor. Projections indicate that if current trends continue, we'll have majority control in approximately 18 months. Kennedy added, "Our transportation technologies are being implemented in 17 cities where your projects were rejected for conceptual obsolescence. It's basically a systematic replacement of your business model." Trinity, always the communications strategist, concluded, "The most ironic part is that our scholarship program for Bronx youth, funded with profits from these replacements, just graduated its first class, 100 students with community college education who are revolutionizing urban planning." The silence that followed was deafening. Jackson Reynolds, the man who had once discarded Maya as unsuitable to carry his surname, was being publicly dismantled by 3 teenagers who carried his DNA and their mother's brilliance. "You can't do this," he finally managed, his voice reduced to a hoarse whisper. "We already have," Maya responded simply. "Not for revenge, Jackson. For evolution." It was at this moment that the event coordinator approached, visibly nervous about the tension permeating the air. "Ms. Washington Chen, we're ready for the award ceremony." Maya nodded graciously, preparing to walk away, when Jackson made one final desperate attempt. "They're my daughters too," he said, loud enough for those nearby to hear. "I have rights." Maya stopped and turned slowly. The 15 years of relentless work, sleepless nights, struggles, and triumphs crystallized in her gaze. "Rights?" She pronounced the word as if it were a foreign concept. You relinquished any rights when you handed me $3,000 and a paternity waiver document in the hospital. Your exact words were, "a mixed-race bastard that would embarrass my family." Remember? The entire salon reacted with a collective intake of shocked breath. Jackson Reynolds, descendant of one of New York's oldest families, was being exposed not just as a failed businessman, but as an absent father and bigot. "I didn't know there were three," he attempted, his voice trembling. "Would that have made a difference?" questioned Trinity, her young voice carrying surprising maturity. "3 times the embarrassment? Or 3 times the inconvenience?" "Basic mathematics," added Ivy with an icy smile. "Something we learned without your contribution." The public exposure continued as Kennedy removed a small device from her pocket. "This is the prototype for our new water purification system, initially developed for Bronx communities without access to clean drinking water. We just closed a $1.2 billion contract with the UN for implementation in regions affected by climate crises. The same regions where Reynolds Enterprises builds ecological resorts that consume local resources," completed Trinity. The event had transformed into a public reckoning, live-streamed by discreetly raised smartphones around the room. Jackson Reynolds' fall and Maya Washington Chen's definitive rise were being documented in real time for American business history. "I suggest you consider your next moves carefully, Mr. Reynolds," Maya said quietly. "Your company is bleeding capital, your last 3 developments failed to secure permits, and your reputation can't afford another public relations disaster." Jackson looked frantically around the room, seeking allies but finding only avid spectators to his humiliation. Even Veronica had edged away, clearly calculating the social cost of standing too close to a sinking ship. "This isn't over," he hissed, desperation replacing his earlier arrogance. "It was over 15 years ago," Maya replied calmly. "You just didn't realize you'd lost until now." The event coordinator cleared his throat nervously. "Ms. Washington Chen, the governor is waiting." Maya turned away from Jackson with the same deliberate grace that characterized her entire reinvention. The triplets followed, 3 perfect reflections of possibility realized despite overwhelming odds. The crowd parted for them, murmurs of admiration and stunned realization following in their wake. On the stage, as Maya accepted the Innovator of the Year award, she could see Jackson still standing by the bar, the shattered remains of his self-image visible in his stunned expression. The crystal award caught the light as she held it aloft, momentarily casting a rainbow across the ceiling, a fitting symbol for the spectrum of possibilities that had emerged from the darkness of her abandonment. "Innovation isn't about technology," she told the audience in her acceptance speech, careful not to look directly at Jackson. "It's about seeing problems as gateways to solutions. It's about recognizing that the people society discards often hold the key to its transformation." After the ceremony, as Maya and her daughters prepared to depart, an assistant approached with an urgent message. "Ms. Washington Chen, Mr. Reynolds is insisting on speaking with you privately. He's quite agitated." Maya exchanged glances with her daughters, a silent conversation passing between them. "Tell him I'll see him tomorrow at my office," she decided. 9 a.m., not a minute later. As they boarded the helicopter for the short flight home, Trinity watched her mother's profile against the Manhattan skyline. "Are you okay?" Maya smiled, the weight of 15 years finally lifting completely from her shoulders. "I'm better than okay. For the first time since that night, I feel truly free." Kennedy leaned forward from her seat. He seemed shocked that we existed. Did he really never try to find out what happened after he left? "Some people are only capable of looking forward when it serves their interests," Maya explained. "They never look back to see the consequences of their actions." Ivy, ever practical, consulted her tablet. "Based on today's events and the market's likely reaction, we should prepare for acquisition proceedings to accelerate. Reynolds Enterprises stock will drop significantly at tomorrow's opening bell." As the helicopter rose above the glittering city, Maya reflected on the perfect symmetry of the evening. She had entered a world that once rejected her, not as a supplicant, but as its new architect. Her daughters, the very beings Jackson had dismissed as embarrassments to his legacy, were now poised to inherit the future he couldn't imagine. When Maya declared, "We already have," not for revenge, Jackson, for evolution, she didn't realize that the cosmic justice she had set in motion was just beginning its most elegant phase, transforming rejection into revolution, abandonment into abundance, and one man's greatest mistake into 3 young women who would reshape the world he thought he owned. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Maya's penthouse as she awoke to her phone vibrating incessantly on the nightstand. 37 missed calls, 129 unread messages, all accumulated in the few hours since she'd silenced her devices after returning from the Metropolitan Museum Gala. She reached for her tablet, sensing that the confrontation with Jackson had already ignited a firestorm. The New York Times digital front page loaded, displaying a photograph that captured perfectly the power shift. Maya Washington Chen on stage receiving the Innovator of the Year award, her posture regal and confident, while in the background, Jackson Reynolds watched with an expression of devastation evident even from a distance. The headline pulled no punches. The Revenge of Success: How Maya Washington Chen Transformed Abandonment into Billion-Dollar Empire. Maya sat up in bed, scrolling through the article with increasing disbelief. The Wall Street Journal reporter's recording had made its way to every major news outlet overnight. Jackson's dismissive comments, her measured responses, and most explosively, the revelation about the triplets' paternity, all were being dissected in excruciating detail across the media landscape. A soft knock at her bedroom door preceded Trinity's entrance. Unlike her usually composed self, her daughter's eyes were red-rimmed, her expression troubled. "Everyone at school knows," she said quietly, sliding onto the edge of the bed. "Someone sent the recording to the entire student body." Ivy and Kennedy appeared in the doorway, equally subdued. For teenagers accustomed to controlling their public narrative with meticulous precision, this sudden exposure felt like a violation. Kennedy, always the most introspective of the 3, finally asked the question they'd been holding since the confrontation. "Why did you never tell us about him?" Maya patted the bed, inviting all 3 to join her. They arranged themselves around her, suddenly looking younger than their 14 years, seeking answers to questions she'd hoped to address on her own terms, not forced by circumstance. "Because the story of who you are doesn't begin with abandonment," Maya said, meeting each daughter's eyes in turn. "It begins with choice. My choice to create a family based on love, not defined by rejection." Ivy, ever the pragmatist, frowned slightly. "But he is our biological father. That alters our projections of life outcomes, our genetic predispositions, our—" "Genetically, yes," Maya interrupted gently. "But a father is much more than DNA. It's presence, it's daily choice, it's sacrifice." She smiled softly. "Like Uncle Marcus, who spent nights helping with your science projects even after 12-hour hospital shifts." The triplets exchanged glances, their identical features reflecting varying degrees of processing this revelation. Trinity, always attuned to human dynamics, asked what her sisters hesitated to verbalize. "Do you think he'll try to be part of our lives now?" Before Maya could respond, her phone chimed with an urgent message from her executive assistant. "Mr. Reynolds is in the Washington Innovations lobby, demanding to see you. Security awaiting instructions." Maya exhaled slowly. "It seems we'll find out sooner rather than later." She instructed her assistant to escort Jackson to the public atrium rather than her private office, a deliberate choice to ensure their conversation would have witnesses. After dressing with careful consideration in a tailored Chanel suit that projected confidence and authority, Maya gathered her daughters. "You don't have to meet him if you don't want to," she assured them. "This is entirely your choice." The triplets conferred silently through glances and subtle gestures, their lifelong method of communication that often left others feeling excluded. "We'll be in the conference room adjacent to the atrium," Trinity decided for the group. "Close enough to intervene if needed, but giving you space for this conversation." 40 minutes later, Maya descended in the private elevator to Washington Innovation's ground floor. The architectural marvel of the atrium, with its sustainable vertical garden and natural light maximization, stood in stark contrast to the harsh conversation about to unfold. Employees and visitors moved through the space, making private discussion impossible, exactly as Maya had intended. Jackson paced near the central water feature, looking simultaneously arrogant and defeated. His designer suit appeared slept in, his eyes bloodshot from what Maya suspected was a night of drinking rather than reflection. When he spotted her, he straightened his posture in a transparent attempt to reassert dominance. "We need to talk privately," he demanded as she approached. "We have nothing that requires privacy," Maya replied calmly, indicating a set of chairs positioned in full view of the atrium's occupants. 15 minutes is all I can offer." Reluctantly, Jackson sat, his eyes darting around at the witnesses to his diminishment. "You planned that entire scene last night, didn't you? The public humiliation, the revelations, all orchestrated to destroy me." Maya studied him with genuine curiosity. "You really believe I organized my entire life around you? That I built a billion-dollar company, raised 3 extraordinary daughters, and revolutionized urban transportation, all for a moment of revenge?" For the first time, Jackson appeared genuinely uncomfortable, the reality of his irrelevance in her journey beginning to penetrate his ego. "Then why expose everything publicly?" "I didn't initiate that conversation, Jackson. You approached me, insulted me, and questioned my belonging in a world I've helped improve." She paused, looking directly into his eyes. "The truth is, you became irrelevant to my story a long time ago. What happened last night was simply you finally realizing it." Jackson shifted tactics, his expression softening into an imitation of remorse. "I want to know my daughters, Maya. They're Reynolds, too." "Washington," she corrected firmly. "They are Washington, and the decision to know you or not rests exclusively with them. They're 14-year-old young women with autonomy to make their own decisions." "I'll pursue legal action if necessary," he threatened, the mask of repentance quickly evaporating. Maya smiled without humor. "Jackson, you signed a document explicitly renouncing paternity. Beyond that, do you really want to face more public exposure about how you abandoned a pregnant woman with racist and classist comments? The few investors who haven't already abandoned your sinking ship certainly would." The reality of his situation finally seemed to hit him. Jackson Reynolds, who had navigated life with the wind of privilege always at his back, now found himself completely adrift. "What do you want then?" he asked finally. "Money? Control of Reynolds Enterprises?" "Nothing," Maya answered simply. "I want absolutely nothing from you, Jackson. This is perhaps the hardest part for you to comprehend. I've built a life so complete, so fulfilled, that there's no empty space where you could possibly fit." At that moment, the elevator doors opened, and the triplets emerged, accompanied by a team of young engineers. They spotted Maya and Jackson, exchanged glances among themselves, and after a brief hesitation, walked in their direction. "Ms. Washington," Jackson stood quickly, attempting to compose himself. "I would very much like to—" "Mr. Reynolds," Trinity interrupted with glacial politeness. "We appreciate your sudden interest, but we have quite a busy schedule." "We've just returned from a meeting with the mayor about the Queen's expansion," Ivy explained. "And we have a video conference with the Tokyo team in 20 minutes, Kennedy completed. The three spoke with the perfect synchronization of those who shared not just identical appearance, but a deep connection of thought and purpose. "Perhaps we could schedule lunch?" Jackson suggested, his voice betraying desperation. "I'd like to get to know you better." The triplets exchanged another look, a silent conversation occurring between them. Finally, Trinity responded, "Perhaps in the future. At present, we're focused on our projects and our mother's well-being. The only person who never abandoned us," Kennedy added softly. Jackson felt the weight of those words like a physical blow. The rejection, polite but definitive, echoed his own cruelty 15 years earlier. "I understand," he murmured, finally grasping the magnitude of what he had lost. Not just a family, but the chance to be part of something truly extraordinary. As he walked away, defeated, Maya observed with a strange sense of closure. There was no triumph in her heart, only the tranquility of someone finally free from a weight she hadn't realized she still carried. That evening, reporters swarmed outside the Washington Chen penthouse, hungry for comments on what had become the business scandal of the year. Inside, Maya sat with her daughters on their private terrace, watching the sunset paint Manhattan in hues of amber and gold. "He really thinks we built all this because of him," Trinity reflected, gesturing toward the city skyline. Maya smiled, embracing her daughters. "The greatest power we have is to build something extraordinary not out of anger or revenge, but despite the pain others caused us." The following morning, the business world awoke to seismic shifts. 3 major investors had withdrawn support from Reynolds Enterprises overnight, citing ethical concerns about leadership. The pending contract with Chicago had been canceled, the mayor publicly referencing the need for partners who reflected the city's values of inclusion and respect. Maya watched Reynolds Enterprises' stock plummet 37% from her office, feeling not satisfaction but a sense of cosmic balance. The market was simply correcting a long-overdue valuation error, rewarding innovation and integrity while punishing stagnation and prejudice. When Jackson Reynolds uttered, "I'll pursue legal action if necessary," he didn't realize he had just handed Maya the perfect tool for the final strike, a public legal battle that would expose every sordid detail of his betrayal 15 years earlier. The word legal action hung in the air between them like a desperate final play from a man who had already lost the game. Maya's expression didn't change as she watched Jackson's retreating figure cross the atrium of Washington Innovations. The emptiness she had expected to feel upon seeing him thoroughly defeated never materialized. Instead, a profound sense of completion washed over her, the final piece of a 15-year journey clicking into place. The following morning, Maya arrived early at her office, preparing for what she knew would be a pivotal day. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Manhattan sprawled before her, the city she had once viewed with intimidation now transformed partly through her own vision and determination. Her executive assistant knocked softly before entering. "Mr. Reynolds is here for his 9 o'clock, she announced. "Security has escorted him to the public atrium as you requested." Maya nodded, gathering the folder she had prepared. "Thank you, Diane. Please let the girls know he's arrived." The Washington Innovations headquarters atrium was an architectural marvel of sustainability. Living walls purified the air, while strategically placed skylights maximized natural illumination. Employees moved purposefully through the space, many pausing to respectfully acknowledge Maya as she crossed toward the central seating area where Jackson waited. He looked different in the harsh morning light. The designer suit that had once seemed to embody power now hung slightly loose on his frame, his complexion sallow beneath artificially maintained tan. The confidence that had once radiated from him now seemed like a poorly maintained facade. "You could have offered your office," Jackson remarked as Maya approached. "Some privacy would be appropriate for this conversation." "We have nothing to discuss that requires privacy," Maya replied calmly, indicating the arrangement of chairs positioned deliberately in full view of passing employees and visitors. "In fact, transparency seems overdue in our interactions." Jackson sat reluctantly, a flash of irritation crossing his features. "You've orchestrated quite a spectacle. The media is having a field day with this revelation." "You approached me, Jackson. You initiated that conversation. My only contribution was honesty." He leaned forward, lowering his voice despite the public setting. "They're my daughters too. I have rights." Maya studied him with genuine curiosity. After 15 years of building a life without him, his sudden claim of parenthood seemed almost absurd. "Rights?" The word fell from her lips as if it were a foreign concept. You relinquished any rights when you handed me $3,000 and a paternity waiver document in the hospital. Your exact words were a mixed-race bastard that would embarrass my family. Do you remember? Jackson shifted uncomfortably, glancing around at potential witnesses. I didn't know they were triplets. Would that have made a difference? Maya asked, her voice steady. 3 times the embarrassment? Or 3 times the inconvenience? Before Jackson could respond, the elevator doors opened, and the triplets emerged. They moved with synchronized grace toward where their mother sat, their expressions composed yet cautious. Jackson stood abruptly, his eyes darting between the 3 identical faces that carried unmistakable echoes of his own features. Ms. Washington, he began awkwardly, correcting himself. I mean, Trinity, Ivy, Kennedy. I've been hoping for an opportunity to speak with you properly. Trinity, always the diplomat, responded first. Mr. Reynolds, we appreciate your interest but understand our perspective. We've had 14 years to build our identities without your input. I want to be part of your lives, Jackson insisted. To get to know you, to offer opportunities, connections. We've developed our own opportunities and connections, Ivy interjected, her analytical gaze assessing him like a particularly unimpressive investment prospect. Stanford has already accepted Trinity for their strategic communications program. MIT has invited me to join their computational economics research. Kennedy will be attending Harvard next fall for sustainable materials science. Jackson's expression flickered between pride and realization. These extraordinary young women had achieved excellence completely without his contribution. I'm going to enter a legal petition for visitation rights, he stated, a hint of his old arrogance returning. I have excellent attorneys. Maya remained calm, having anticipated this move. Jackson, you signed a legally binding document renouncing all paternity rights before they were born. Additionally, do you really want court proceedings that would publicly examine your abandonment, the statements you made about their racial background, the psychological evaluation that would assess your 15 years of complete disinterest followed by sudden attention after discovering their exceptional abilities and our company's success? Kennedy, who had remained silent until now, spoke with quiet precision. The probability of successful litigation is approximately 3%, given the documentation and witness testimony available. The reputational damage to Reynolds Enterprises would be approximately 78% greater than current levels, which are already approaching critical thresholds. Jackson stared at Kennedy, recognition dawning in his eyes, not just of her intelligence but of how thoroughly out of his depth he was with these young women who carried his DNA but none of his limitations. What do you want then? He finally asked, turning back to Maya. Control of Reynolds Enterprises? Money? Revenge? Nothing, Maya answered simply. I want absolutely nothing from you, Jackson. This is perhaps the hardest part for you to comprehend. I've built a life so complete, so fulfilled, that there's no empty space where you could possibly fit. The triplets stood slightly behind their mother, a united front that needed no dramatic declarations. Their presence spoke volumes. 3 extraordinary young women raised with love, purpose, and values entirely without his input. The girls may choose to know you someday, Maya continued. That will be entirely their decision, not mine. But they will do so from a position of strength and choice, not need. Jackson looked defeated, the reality of his situation finally penetrating the armor of privilege and entitlement he'd worn his entire life. I've made mistakes, he admitted quietly. Significant ones. Yes, Maya agreed without malice, starting with seeing people as disposable when they no longer serve your purpose. As if summoned by those words, the morning news alert chimed simultaneously on several devices around the atrium. The screens displayed the opening stock market reports. Reynolds Enterprises had dropped an additional 22% in the first hour of trading. Trinity glanced at her tablet and spoke softly to her mother. The acquisition timeline has accelerated significantly. The board is meeting in emergency session at 11. Ivy added, "Our financial team projects we could secure controlling interest within 10 days at this trajectory." Jackson's face paled as he overheard this exchange. "You're going to destroy everything my family built over 3 generations." Maya regarded him thoughtfully. "No, Jackson. We're going to transform it into something better. Evolution, not destruction." 2 weeks later, Maya stood at the podium in the Reynolds Enterprises headquarters, addressing the assembled employees who watched with a mixture of apprehension and hope. The Wall Street Journal headline that morning had announced, "Washington Innovations acquires controlling interest in Reynolds Enterprises. Today marks not an ending but a beginning," Maya told the nervous staff. "Reynolds Enterprises will become Eudora Foundations, dedicated to creating sustainable, affordable housing in historically underserved communities." She gestured toward the digital rendering projected behind her, a comprehensive urban development featuring mixed-income housing, integrated transportation hubs, and community wellness centers. "No one will lose their job in this transition," Maya continued. "Instead, we're redirecting the considerable talent in this room towards solving real problems for real people. The luxury developments will continue, but they will help subsidize accessible housing at a 3-to-1 ratio." In the back of the room, Jackson Reynolds stood with his arms crossed, watching the company that had been his birthright transformed before his eyes. Yet even he couldn't deny the energy in the room, the renewed purpose in faces that had grown jaded under his leadership. After the presentation, Maya found him staring at the new company logo, a stylized tree with deep roots and spreading branches, named after her grandmother who had taken her in when she had nothing. "Why Eudora?" he asked quietly. "My grandmother believed everyone deserves a home where they're valued," Maya replied, "even when all evidence suggests otherwise." Jackson nodded slowly. "The design is good, better than what we had planned for the Brooklyn waterfront." Kennedy designed the environmental systems. Ivy restructured the financing to make it viable. Trinity developed the community engagement framework. Maya allowed herself a small smile. "They're extraordinary in every way." "Yes," Jackson agreed, a complexity of emotions crossing his face. "They are." 1 month later, Maya and her daughters sat on the terrace of their penthouse, watching the sunset paint Manhattan in shades of amber and gold. The New York skyline now included the first Eudora Foundations development rising where a stalled Reynolds luxury tower had once been planned. "Do you think he'll ever understand what happened?" Trinity asked, watching a helicopter with the Washington Innovations logo circled toward their private landing pad. "Some people can only see the world through the lens of winners and losers," Maya replied. "They can't comprehend building something that lifts everyone." Ivy, always data-driven, observed, "The stock value of the reorganized company has increased 42% since the acquisition. The employee satisfaction metrics are up 67%. Kennedy, characteristically focused on tangible impact, added, "The first residents move into Eudora Heights next month. 248 families who previously couldn't afford to live within an hour of their workplaces." Maya embraced her daughters, these extraordinary young women who had transformed her life as much as she had shaped theirs. The journey that had begun in tears and abandonment had led to this moment of creation and purpose. "The greatest power we have," she told them, "is building something extraordinary not out of anger or revenge, but despite the pain others caused us." As the lights of the city began to twinkle in the growing darkness, Maya Washington Chen contemplated the empire she had built, not merely of concrete, steel, and technology, but of determination, dignity, and unconditional love. The true victory wasn't in overcoming Jackson Reynolds, but in creating a life so complete that his absence had become entirely irrelevant. And that, she knew, was the purest form of liberation.